Hello, everyone. Welcome. If you could just give us one moment to get our cameras up and ready. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. If this is your first time with us, welcome to another episode of Cooking Connected. My name is Jordan. Joining me today is my coworker, Sajwa.
Hi, everybody.
Both Sajwa and I are program coordinators with the Cooking Matters Minnesota program with the University of Minnesota Extension. So normally a Cooking Matters class is an in-person nutrition-based cooking class that meets once a week for 2 hours for 6 weeks. Classes normally feature a nutrition educator and a chef that work together to teach our participants about a healthy, delicious, affordable recipe, as well as some nutrition topics that go along with the recipe. Today, we are going to be following that same format, except virtually. We will be making the spaghetti squash and broccoli Alfredo, and we would like to thank the creators of this recipe, Teri and Jerry, with spoonforkbacon.com. Sajwa will be our chef, and I will be our nutrition educator. So just like every week, we do have another survey for everyone to take. You will need a program code for this survey, which I have right here. So this week's program code, let's make sure, my blur is on, everyone, I'm sorry. I will let you know this week's program code, which is E099805. So the program code can be found in the live chat as well as the description box of our videos. So if you did not catch that, feel free to check out those description boxes for the survey link, our program code, as well as today's recipe with spoonforkbacon.com. So thank you in advance for that feedback. We really appreciate it. It helps us make our videos better, a little bit better every time. But with that, let's go ahead and get started with today's recipe, and I will turn it over to Sajwa.
Great. So let's go ahead and get started. Like Jordan mentioned, we're going to be doing a spaghetti squash and broccoli Alfredo, my word. But before we get started with that, we're going to cover a couple of basics here. First and foremost, making sure that our hands are clean. Wash my hands for 20 seconds, really getting in between those fingers, underneath your fingernails. Don't forget your wrists too. 20 seconds, you can sing the ABC song or the happy birthday song twice. Next, I just want to talk a little bit about my setup over here. So my space has been cleaned and sanitized. Those are two different things. So cleaned, I've wiped away any debris or any dirt or anything, crumbs. And then sanitizing, I've used a disinfectant spray to get rid of, the viruses or bacteria that might be lingering on my surface. So that's a really important step that you want to make sure you're taking care of. And then finally, as you guys can see in the chef view, I do have my mise en place done. So I have everything I need out and ready to go. This is the first time I'm going to be doing this recipe. So when it's the first time you're doing a recipe, having your mise en place is a really great way to make sure you're just going through the steps and you're not having to futz around in your cabinets and stuff. So this is what my mise en place is looking like. Now, why don't we go ahead and get started? I just want to adjust my view for you all. There we go. So today we will be working with a spaghetti squash. I did have to do a little bit of prep work with my spaghetti squash before we got started today. So all I did was I cut my squash in half and I popped that in the oven. I put the cut sides down on the pan, popped that in the oven at 375 for about an hour or until it was soft enough for me to kind of scoop through it with a fork. So depending on your oven. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and scoop the insides of our spaghetti squash into a mixing bowl. So let's go ahead and get started with that then.
We have worked with spaghetti squash on Cooking Connected before, so if you'd like to see other recipes with spaghetti squash, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. And that, again, is in the description box to check out another recipe with spaghetti squash. I absolutely love spaghetti squash. It's a great substitute.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great way to incorporate some more vegetables and such into your diet, especially I love pasta dishes, but sometimes I can't go pasta overload sometimes. So, you got to be careful with that.
Absolutely.
So this is scooping out really nice and easy. And I'm using a fork here, just kind of pulling that out where it's a little bit tougher, but That time in the oven did us good. And then we want to save the outside of our squash containers. We're going to be using that to serve up our dish. So that'll give us a little bit of flair for later on. I'm going to pop that to the side in another, pan that I have behind me. Let's work this other one too here.
And benefits less dishes here, so that's nice.
And it would be really fun for, young kids who might not have tried spaghetti squash before. It's kind of a new way to present it to them. And that could be really fun. This guy kind of tore a little bit, but that's okay.
And you can tell Sajwa's spaghetti squashes really is done. A lot of times those spaghetti squashes, you can just kind of flake the top where you cut it, and it'll start to kind of come off in little strings like spaghetti. But if it's not flaking very well, just throw it back in the oven for a little bit.
All right, so we've got our spaghetti squash out here. Yeah, mine is really well done. I'm just working with this very gently with a fork. I don't even have to put a lot of pressure there. So I'm just gonna kind of break things up a little bit in here. And then the recipe says that we do want to lightly season with some salt and pepper. So let's just go ahead and do that. A little bit of pepper, just kind of a sprinkle. A little bit of salt. There we go. Those things to the side. I'm going to give this a stir, and then I'm going to set this aside because we're going to do a little bit more prep before we move to our working in our skillet today. So that looks really good. And it smells good too. All right. So now let's go ahead and work through a couple of things. We are going to be working with broccoli today. You just need one head of broccoli, but of course, there's always the opportunity to add it. If you have a second one, go ahead and add that in. It doesn't hurt to have extra veggies in your dish. And then also I do have some fresh basil leaves, which we'll be using to top our squash dish. So I'm gonna cut those up and prep those. And then today we're also working with a shallot, which is in the onion family, if you didn't know that. I also did look at this recipe. I think if you used frozen broccoli, that would work fine too. Right now with it being wintertime, it's not always easy to find a beautiful head of broccoli like this. So just keep that in mind. You could definitely use a frozen option, and I think that would work well. Now, before we get to cutting our broccoli, I do want to review a little bit of our knife safety and knife handling. I'm just going to pinch my blade with my index finger, got my thumb on the back there, and then I'm wrapping my fingers around the handle like so. This is going to give me a lot of really nice control. Then with my other hand, I'm going to make a claw as I cut, tucking in my fingers. We're going to tuck those in to protect those fingertips there. So let's just chop off some of our broccoli heads. And for this recipe, we are only going to be using the heads, but that doesn't mean that the stem has no use at all. You can definitely use this, in another recipe. It's just good broccoli. Chop it up, steam it. You can eat it. Possibly could work well in your broth bag if you wanted to do that. Although I do think it would give a very strong flavor, but anything works there. So
absolutely. I've definitely thrown broccoli stems in my broth bag, but I actually really enjoy using them in like a stir fry. So a lot of times when you buy like chopped broccoli, frozen broccoli in the store, they'll have those little square chunks of broccoli in there, and that's actually the stem that they've chopped up. So just go ahead and peel that stem. Make sure it's rinsed, of course. That's part of our mise en place. Chop up that stem real fine, and you can throw it in a lot of different things, but I really enjoy them in stir fries as well.
So after just chopping those to a bit smaller pieces, I'm going to pop it again in my bowl here. And we're going to move on and we're going to work with our, let's go ahead and do our shallot. With my shallot, I'm just going to do a little bit of a dice. I'm going to give my knife a rinse because I got all these broccoli crumbs.
For those of you who have never worked with shallots before, like Sajwa was saying, it's in the onion family. It's just a little bit more of a mild flavor. Sajwa, do you work with shallots a lot?
No, I usually tend to gravitate towards onions. But I think it works pretty much the same way. They're in the same family. So
So maybe this would be something that we could substitute an onion for if we didn't have a shallot, you think?
I agree. Yeah. And I would just use a smaller onion or a little bit less of an onion because obviously this guy is not as big as some of those larger onions out there. So I'm going to actually use this the same way I would a regular onion. I'm just going to chop the top here. And And I like to do that sometimes to help me peel. This helps me get a little bit more grip there. So I'm going to peel that outer layer of the skin that's there. I will be saving that for that broth bag. That'll add some nice flavor there.
Absolutely. For those of you who don't know what our broth bags are, what we do a lot of times on Cooking Connected, and of course, just in general to save a little money, is save kitchen scraps to make a vegetable broth. You can even make chicken broth if you have chicken bones. We do have a video again on how to do that on our YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out, please go ahead and check that out. Just saves you a little bit of money, so you don't have to buy broth.
So what you guys just saw me do there is I went ahead and I did keep my fuzzy, oh, it's kind of hard to see in that angle, sorry. I did keep my fuzzy bottom there to kind of hold my shallot together, but I just followed the natural grooves of the shallot and I did some lines going down, some slices going down there. And I want to get a dice with this guy. So now I'm going to go the opposite way, just the same way we've been doing our onions. We use onions a lot with Cooking Connected. So we've reviewed this technique probably a million times, it feels. So I know that we've gone over this. It's just the same thing. And now that I'm getting to this part, I'm going to just cut down to the fuzzy part. I want to get as much as that shallot as I can. And then this little bottom part piece, I will save that for my broth bag. So I'm going to pop that over here. So that's our shallot. And hey, I don't usually work with shallots, but I might have to with the way that my eyes are not watering. So there's definitely a pro there.
Yeah.
And so now that we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and cut up some of this fresh basil I have. You don't necessarily have to use a fresh one. We're just going to be using it to kind of top our squash at the end. But as you can see, I'm just kind of tucking mine into a nice tidy bundle like so. I'm going to go through with some slices.
If you ever have the opportunity to own a basil plant, I would definitely suggest it, but I am also a fan of pesto. But sometimes these fresh herbs can be a little expensive, so you can feel free to substitute dried herbs for some recipes. It does end up being a little bit cheaper and more shelf stable, but sometimes you can have a basil plant and then you have the opportunity to make pesto as well. So something to think about for next summer when it's not so cold.
Basil plants tend to grow really quickly. They have a lot of quick turnaround. I had a basil plant and that guy just kept on giving me basil. I was overwhelmed by the amount.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. And then just another note, I'm using the back of my knife here, just FYI, to kind of slide things over, keep my space clear. Just another note, this recipe does call for garlic. At the moment, I just have some pre-minced garlic that came in a container. And I'm going to follow the measuring units that they say here. About a half teaspoon equals 1 clove of garlic. But if you're not using pre-minced garlic, go ahead and use 3 cloves of regular garlic. And we've done that garlic technique quite a few times, but just to review, I would set my garlic here, put my knife or another flat surface on top, use the palm of my hand, and just go down on that till I hear that crunch. It's going to break the skin and I would peel it off and save my skin for my broth bag. Then I'll go down and chop off those hard, kind of woody ends of the garlic, possibly save those for my broth bag. Then I would do some slices and then I would go with our mincing technique like so. So just keep that in mind. We've done that in so many videos though. I feel like I could go ahead with the quick way and get myself some minced garlic this time.
Absolutely.
So now that we've taken care of a lot of our prep work, let's go ahead and move on to our skillet. I'm going to change my view here just so you guys can see where I'm at. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the skillet. Let's go ahead and turn our heat onto a medium heat. I'm going to use a little bit of oil just to drizzle to kind of wet my pan here. And then we are going to need 2 tablespoons of butter with this recipe. So we're going to go ahead and include that. It says to heat my oil and my butter together. And with that, we're going to go ahead and add in those shallots and we're going to add in that garlic. That's going to cook for about 2 to 3 minutes there till those shallots start to become translucent, just like you would see with like a normal onion kind of situation. So I'm going to let that heat up there. And let's
And
get
that
the,
tip that Sajwa just did with the oil and butter, that's a really great tip to kind of have in your arsenal as well. If you're a butter lover, in my household, we really enjoy butter, but sometimes eating it all the time is just not very good for us. So if you actually use oil as the main kind of, as the main like, I guess, I don't know, use oil over butter. You can add like a tablespoon of butter just so you have the taste of that, but the health benefits of the oil as well. So just kind of a fun way to get the taste of butter still in your food as well.
I hope that the light, does it help a little bit on that chef view end?
Yeah, looks good.
See a little better. There we go. I want to make sure you guys are getting that full experience. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and add that minced garlic in there too. 3/2 teaspoons to equal the 3 cloves. And 3. Yeah, that's a lot quicker sometimes than always going through that garlic smashing process. So there's my little shortcut for the day. So I've got this heated up on a medium heat. It's just going to be a moment here. Starting to see my butter melt. I can smell that yummy garlic and the shallots cooking together. It smells really good. And a little bit of basil did get in there because they were next to each other on the cutting board, but that's fine. No problem there. Okay.
That is definitely one of my favorite smells in the whole world is onions and garlic cooking on the stove.
So while we're letting those cook a little bit, we are going to be adding our cream. So we are indulging today with today's recipe. I'm going to use a little bit of heavy whipping cream. And Jordan's going to go over other ways that we can, kind of lighten up this recipe if you wanted to make it a little bit healthier. But also it's fine to indulge every once in a while. That's totally okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get that together. For this recipe, we're going to want 1.5 cups of the cream. And we'll just be adding that into this lovely mixture that's starting to cook up. I can hear it. We'll be adding that in shortly.
So when we add that cream in, Sajwa, does it need a little time to reduce? Do I have a little time to start some nutrition education?
It will need some time to reduce. We're actually going to be adding our cream and our Parmesan in there, so it will need a little bit of time. That would be a great time to do some nutrition.
Perfect. All right, everyone. So like Sajwa was saying, we can lighten up some of our recipes. So everyone has different tastes and preferences, which means we all have different favorite recipes. And sometimes those recipes are maybe not the best for us. We might be eating them a little bit more just because, we love them. And so does our family. So I have a couple of recipes on my menu plan right now that are tried and true in our household, though they're definitely a favorite. I love them. My family loves them. So I turn to them a lot, but they're maybe not the best for us. So there's some ways that we can lighten these things up, make it a little healthier. So like today's recipe, we're seeing some heavy whipping cream, and that's totally fine. We're making a beautiful Alfredo sauce today. Definitely one of my favorites. But a lot of times that heavy cream, if we're eating it a lot, it's just not really great for us. So like I said, we're going to discuss a few small substitutions you can make, maybe some baby steps to make your favorite recipes just a little bit healthier. So with my favorites, my favorite food of all time is tacos. I could not live without tacos. So thinking about what I normally eat in a taco, it's my shell, and then I have ground beef or cheese, some cheese sauce, all those unhealthy things that maybe I shouldn't eat a lot of. So thinking about that, what are some things that we can do to make that a little bit healthier? A great substitution for that ground beef will be to sub turkey. So like a ground turkey or a ground chicken are really great options. They're lean meats and they have less saturated fat than our ground beef. So that would be a really great substitution in a lot of different recipes. So just making sure that we check out and make sure that it's a good substitution in the recipe. So a lot of times if you're unsure, you can Google it. Google's kind of my best friend when it comes to looking up substitutions. So for instance, if I don't have an ingredient or If I want to make it a little lighter, I will go on Google and see if anybody else has a recipe that's a little bit lighter, or if there are any suggested substitutions. So we're going to talk about a few more. Again, that ground turkey or ground chicken are great substitutions for ground beef. The sour cream on top of our tacos, we can substitute with a plain Greek yogurt. So we've talked about this a lot. In fact, we talked about probably both of these tips in our very first Cooking Connected, which was turkey tacos. So and that's actually one of my favorite Cooking Matters recipes. So if you haven't had a chance to check that recipe out, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel and see our very first Cooking Connected and see how much we've grown, hopefully, in Cooking Connected. So again, substituting Greek yogurt, a plain low-fat Greek yogurt for sour cream. It's a really great substitution because it's got a lot of protein and a little less calories. Some salt. So like if we are some salt lovers out there, you can substitute salt with a lot of different spices. We can substitute, or if you are a salt lover, so one thing that you can do is actually add the salt as the very last thing. So you're sitting down at your meal and you'd like to add a little bit of salt, you can just add a pinch of salt directly on top of your meal right before you're about to eat it. That way, that's the first thing you're tasting, and then you kind of get that craving satisfied a little bit. So if you're a salt lover, you can just add a little less on top. Or you can substitute with different seasonings. Seasonings are a really great way to do this. So in this recipe, we have that amazing basil, we're using garlic, so we're using all these amazing flavors. And you're seeing Sajwa didn't use much salt at all in the recipe. And it looks like she's just about to add her Parmesan there to complete our Alfredo.
So we're going to need about 3 ounces of our Parmesan. And just to kind of piggyback off of what you're saying there, Jordan, you know, the Parmesan's got a lot of good flavor, and it's going to have a little bit of that salt content in there too. So keep that in mind, you guys. So I'm just adding my 3 ounces of Parmesan in there. Oops. We're going to just let that thicken a little bit more.
Absolutely. So there are some lighter Alfredo sauces out there that you can make. My next point was our heavy cream. We can actually substitute with like a half and half, or even a low-fat milk. And one of these days, Cooking Matters actually does have a light Alfredo sauce. One of these days, hopefully we will get that out to everyone. Just there are a few differences. A lot of times I've seen some recipes that actually use cornstarch in their Alfredo, and that's just to thicken, or it takes a little bit more time than the heavy cream. You see how quickly Sajwa's heavy cream is already thickening up. So if we use a kind of a low-fat milk, it ends up taking a little bit more time to reduce.
So just to hop in there, guys, now that my now that my heavy cream has thickened, don't forget about those squash guts. We're going to add that in there right now into our Alfredo. There we go. Yes, there we go. And also another thing that I'm just going to be doing with this recipe, the recipe doesn't call for it, but you know what? I know that some Italian seasoning is going to give me a lot of really excellent flavor. It definitely matches this flavor profile that we're kind of going with. So I'm going to add just a little bit of Italian seasoning to this recipe. Just a little bit of that for some more flavor. And now I'm going to stir in my squash. I've got my Parmesan cheese in there. I've got my heavy whipping cream. We did the garlic. We have the shallots. Let's go ahead and mix all of that in there together.
Yes. So Sajwa is already modeling all of these awesome ways we can make our recipes healthier. Italian seasoning is a beautiful addition to this recipe. And it's also just kind of a nice seasoning to get in general because it's so versatile. Because it is a blend, it has a lot of different types of seasonings in there. So like oregano, thyme, and all sorts of others in there to just make that seasoning. So yum, that looks amazing.
Yeah, so it's just as simple as a stir. Oops. And now at this point, I always have the bad habit of leaving my spoons in whatever dish, whatever skillet I'm using at the time. I gotta stop that.
I do it too.
So we've gone on, and I want you guys to be able to see that. And I hope that the light is still pretty good. Yeah, there you go. So we can focus a little bit more on our cutting board side. So now I've got those hollowed out squash shells. We're gonna actually use that right now. I'm gonna be filling these with our mixture from the skillet today. I can actually turn that down. Things are nice and thick. I've seen my Parmesan has gotten all melted and gooey. My broccoli is nice and tender. So I'm gonna fill up my squash, my hollowed squash shells, and then we're gonna sprinkle that basil on top. And if you like, you could add a little bit more cheese. That's really up to you. And then we'll just pop that in the broiler on low, excuse me, for about 2 minutes. So it's a very simple recipe here. So let's go ahead and just do that. Giving this a final stir before I, there we go. All right. I'll work with this one that's not broken yet. Okay. And I'm telling you, the presentation with this recipe.
Yeah, I'm just loving the less dishes aspect.
Oh man, so there's one for us. And we're gonna work with this little guy that's a little broken, but that's okay. We can still work with him. Maybe I'll actually keep him in here since he's a little broken. All right. Yeah, I really like this recipe. It's very quick and easy. And even that little bit of prep I had to do ahead of time by putting the squash in the oven for about an hour. It's pretty hands-free once you cut the squash in half, So very easy recipe there.
Absolutely. Yeah, spaghetti squash is surprisingly easy. When we first made it, I was very surprised by that. But I really enjoy it now, so.
Yeah, I think it's just something sometimes people don't really know what to do with it or what you can do with it a lot of the time. Oh, there's like a nice cheese dude. You guys see that good cheese hanging on? Hubba. All right. So we've got our squash in these little containers, and I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of basil, put those together on top. No, I really like basil, so I'm a little heavy-handed with my basil, you guys. I don't mind a strong basil flavor in there. Okay, and then with that, we're just gonna pop these in the broiler. And what you're gonna wanna do with these is wait for the top to get all nice and dark, kind of like a caramelized on top. So it'll just be 2 minutes in there.
While we're waiting for that to broil, we'll finish up with a little bit more nutrition education. We've kind of talked about a lot of these tips already. So again, substituting heavy cream. For a heavy cream, half and half in milk. Just takes a little bit longer to reduce, but it's a lot lighter. But of course, again, it is okay in moderation. I know a lot of times Alfredo is one of my favorites, so it's okay to indulge every once in a while. We've already talked about butter. We can substitute oil for butter, or we can add just a little bit of butter and do the majority oil. So that way we still get that taste from the butter. Like we're doing today, we can substitute pasta for veggie noodles. So we've done zoodles in the past, which is zucchini noodles. We can do, I've actually seen carrots done before. I haven't tried that one yet, but someday I will. And of course, we've got spaghetti squash. So there's a lot of different options, and that's a really great way to kind of sneak in more vegetables into our diet. If we got kiddos that maybe need a few more veggies, that's a great way to do it. In addition to that, a white pasta, if you're a fan of white pasta or white rice, you can substitute that for a brown pasta or a whole wheat pasta. We've talked about whole wheat quite a bit on Cooking Connected. It provides a lot more vitamins and fiber that we need compared to like the white all-purpose flour. So with white pasta and white rice, you can substitute that for a brown rice or a whole wheat pasta. If you're not used to that or your family isn't used to that, one thing that you can actually do is just add a little bit of the whole wheat to the white pasta and just kind of get your taste buds acclimated to it. And eventually you won't even notice. That's what I did with my family. And now we're finally exclusively on whole wheat pasta.
There you go.
Takes a little time, but that's all right. Taking baby steps for healthier choices is okay. Eventually all the good stuff will crowd out the bad. Another thing, like breads, if we enjoy like a white bread, you can do a whole wheat bread or a whole wheat flour even. So they have whole wheat flours. A lot of options out there are whole wheat. So I was thinking the other day about breadcrumbs. We use breadcrumbs for some dishes. There is whole wheat breadcrumbs even that you can buy instead of just like the Italian seasoning breadcrumbs that you get all the time. Our cheeses, so you can substitute different cheeses for low fat cheeses. So like a part skim cheese, a low fat cheese. So another tip I've heard recently is you can use like a sharp cheddar. A lot of times that sharp cheddar has a lot of flavor, so you use a little bit less of it. So if you're a fan of like that Colby Jack and shredded, maybe you would buy a sharp cheddar instead and taste the difference. Just because there's so much more flavor to that sharp cheddar, a lot of times you end up using a little less. So maybe that's something to try in the future. Of course, sodas, we've talked about a little bit about sugary sweetened beverages. You can substitute sodas for different flavored waters. Putting lime or lemon in your water or different fruits is a great option. Keeping hydrated is very important. And finally, you can substitute meats for different non-meat options, and those end up being a little bit more reasonable as well. So beans and tofu are really great options for substitutes for meat, and they're a lot more reasonable too. So if you haven't tried those, give them a try. It's something different you can show to your family. So it looks like Sajwa has got our squash ready.
Yes, you guys. So I took my squash out of the broiler. And so it's looking really good. It's pretty much ready to go. Again, if you were to add a little bit more cheese on top, I would wait for that to get a little bit more golden, but we are good to go. And it smells wonderful over here, you guys. I'm just really excited to try this. So yes, that's our spaghetti squash recipe.
It looks absolutely gorgeous. Thank you so much, Sajwa, for showing us that cooking demonstration today. It's beautiful.
Okay.
So with that, of course, as always, please don't forget to take our survey. I'm sorry, I can't show. Oh, maybe I can.
Oh.
So this week's program code again is E099805. The link to our survey is in the description box as well as in the live chat. So go ahead and take our survey and use that program code. We sure appreciate that feedback. And finally, we would also, again, like to thank the creators of this recipe, Teri and Jerry with spoonforkbacon.com. If you want to try this recipe, go ahead and, again, look in the description box below of our video. But with that, we hope to see you all again next week for another episode of Cooking Connected. We will be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. with another amazing recipe. So we hope to see you all here. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.